Hello, everybody. Welcome to a special event today. It's a panel, and it's a panel on digital humanism and issues in education and teaching. Today, it's again 1 hour later due to some teaching duties of some of the panelists. We have 4 panelists. Thanks to all of you for participating, and the moderation will be done by Anna Bohn. And she will also introduce the panelists afterwards. The time duration today, it will be a little bit longer as we have 4 panelists, so I think we will have 1.5 hours. And at the end, it's again a piece of music chosen by Anna. And now, before introducing Anna Bohn for the moderation, also big thanks to those who have organized this event. It's Viola Schiafonatti, Hans Ackermann, Peter Knees, and Anna. And thanks for organizing this panel on education. We had it for a long time on our plan, but now finally we succeeded. Thanks for that. It's moderated by Anna. Thanks, Anna. She is a researcher and lecturer in ICT for development at Vrije University of Amsterdam and also Maastricht University. She is acting as a senior project manager for international project at Vrije University of Amsterdam. And there she is mainly related and directing interdisciplinary research in education and community service programs. Also, for example, the Web Alliance for Regreening in Africa. She is doing interdisciplinary research. It's also her background. So it's questions like how innovative, context-aware technology can be developed in a cooperative, co-creative way to support local communities in Africa, but also in Asia. She has a very rich project experience in the field on technology-related projects in West Africa, Mali, or also Malaysia. And it's also related to the digital divide. At the same time, she's also acting as senior editor of the Electronic Journal for Information Systems in Developing Countries. It's a quite impressive CV, Anna. Thanks again for moderating, putting it together, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Hannes. Thank you very much for this invitation to moderate this session, Educating Future Computer Professionals to Ethical and Social Impacts of Digital Technologies. So in the panel, we have 4 experts on, let's say, higher education, computer science, especially on ethics and on social impact. So I'm introducing the 4 panelists today. So we have Dimna O'Sullivan, Rodrigo Ferreira. I hope that he has already arrived because I have not yet seen him. Maybe he was a bit late because he was still lecturing, but he will come in probably a bit later. Then we have Viola Schiafonatti and Bobby Schnabel, and I will introduce the 4 of them briefly, and then I will give them the floor to tell something about their work. So the first panelist that I'm introducing is Dimna O'Sullivan. She is a senior lecturer and assistant head of school at the School of Computer Science at Technical University Dublin City Campus. She received a bachelor and PhD in computer science in 2002 and 2006 respectively, and completed her postdoctoral work in health informatics with the MET research group at the University of Ottawa. And she became a lecturer in computer science at Aston University in Birmingham. In 2012, she moved to City University of London as a senior lecturer in health informatics. And she worked as a senior lecturer in data analytics at the National College of Ireland. And her research interests are in the area of health informatics, in particular in the design, development, evaluation of decision support systems to support clinician and patient decision-making. And this work involves research across many aspects of the domain, including electronic and personal health records, machine learning and intelligent algorithms, especially explainable AI. I've heard that you have done a lot on that, and sensors and smart home technologies, accessible user interfaces and theories of health, behavior change. So that is the introduction of Dimna, and I will give you the floor. But first of all, I will introduce the other panelists. So Rodrigo, he's not yet there. Did you arrive, Rodrigo? No, not yet. But well, anyway, then I will first introduce Viola. Viola Schiafonati is Associate Professor of Logic and Philosophy of Science at Politecnico di Milano, and she holds a PhD in Philosophy of Science from the University of Genova. She has been visiting scholar at the Department of Philosophy of the University of California and Berkeley, and visiting researcher at the SUPE Center of the Interdisciplinary Study of Science and Technology at Stanford University. And Viola is director of the CINI National Laboratory in Informatics and Society. And she has been a member of the European Commission Expert Group of AI and Data in Education and Training as representative of Informatics Europe. Her interests are in philosophy of AI and robotics, and ethical issue of intelligent and autonomous systems, and that is very relevant for this panel. So the third panelist is Bobby Schnabel, and he's a professor of computer science and external chair of the department, including strategic planning, tech community and alumni relations, and faculty monitoring of the College of Engineering and Applied Science, faculty director, and campus thought leadership on computing. Previously, he was the director and CEO of ACM, the Association of Computing Machinery, and Dean of the School of Informatics and Computing at Indiana University. He has, and very interestingly, he has been the co-founder of the National Center of Women and Information Technology, and he continues to serve on the executive team of this center. So, well, do we wait for Rodrigo, or do we start now? Maybe we should start now. So the idea is of this panel is to discuss what kind of education do we need for the digital society. So we are in a huge transition. The digital society is changing very fast, and there are many challenges that that come up every day, and even challenges that we cannot predict, but that will come in the future. So how do we prepare the new generation of professionals? And they will be trained in digital skills. The European Union has set a goal of training 20 million ICT experts before 2030. And that is a huge challenge, but there is a bias towards techno-optimism in this. So if you just train people on AI, blockchain technologies, machine learning, data science, and all the technical skills that are new at this moment, you are maybe forgetting that people also need to have the knowledge on ethics and social implications. So therefore, I want to invite you to discuss this. But first of all, I'll give you the floor. So I'll start with Dimna. Can you introduce your work a bit to us?
Yes, thank you so much, Anna. Thank you for that introduction, and also thank you obviously for the invitation to take part in the panel. You can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll just give it, I suppose, a little bit more detail about myself. As you say, my name is Dimna O'Sullivan. I'm a senior academic at TU Dublin School of Computer Science. Currently, I'm seconded as the academic director of TU Dublin's Digital Futures Research Hub. And that's an interdisciplinary research institute that really, explores how to create new digital technologies with a real focus on AI and data science, but with those technologies having, positive impacts for individual society and the economy and the environment. I also lead the ethics work group of Informatics Europe, along with Gordana Dojdic, who I'm delighted to see is in the audience today. As you mentioned, I have a PhD in computer science, specifically in artificial intelligence. And my research, although I focus a lot on health informatics, it's I suppose more broadly in the design and the development of human-centered AI systems. And in my research in human-centered AI systems, I emphasize a collaborative, participatory approach to technology design that involves academics, industry practitioners, domain experts, policymakers, and end users working together to create, genuinely inclusive technologies that address these key ethical issues like bias and exclusion. So we're very focused, I suppose, in my own research, but also I think at the TU Dublin Digital Futures Research Institute, about how we incorporate ethical questions into the design and evaluation technology, and the need to move beyond technology-driven design assumptions, and ask questions like, what are the societal implications of this technology? Who are we excluding? And what safeguards should we consider? I've recently spoken quite extensively about the EU AI Act. Obviously, here in Dublin, we have large numbers of US multinationals, so we interact a lot with industry, and particularly in the sort of AI and computer science industry. And in terms of the EU AI Act, we certainly welcome the risk-based approach for classifying AI systems. But I'm advocating very strongly, I think, for a stronger citizen voice in AI legislation, because I really think we need to create a sort of a societal consent for AI. I recently led the Ethics for You project, working closely again with Gordana and Viola, who I'm delighted is joining us on the panel today. And the Ethics for You project, that was a transnational European project that developed new curricula and learning resources for computer science, software engineering, and informatics students. The resources followed a case study-based approach. So we took sort of pertinent or well-known case studies that explored computing ethics dilemma. And we developed a train the trainer model for upskilling computer science lecturers across Europe, because one of the things we identified really was a lack of computer science lecturers, who could and were willing to teach about computing ethics. So the resources are openly available on our website for anybody who'd like to use them. The website is www.ethicsforyou.eu. So that's enough about me. I think for now you can pass on to the next panelist.
Thank you, Dimna. Viola, could you briefly introduce your work and your interests better than I did?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Anna. And I'm a philosopher, and in particular, a philosopher of science and technology, and working in computer engineering and computer science. And also, I think it's important for me to emphasize that I work within a computer engineering department. And in a sense, I could say that part of my job and my research is to integrate the humanities and the engineering sciences. And to this end, I founded with two colleagues back, I would say 7 years ago, a group of scholars in the humanities and social sciences to work within our technical university, which is Politecnico di Milano, a large technical university in Italy. And so we were just three of us, located in different departments, and now we are a group of almost 25 people working in the humanities and social sciences in the different departments. So part of my job, of course, my research, it's more in the philosophy and ethics of artificial intelligence and robotics, but part of my job is also teaching. And I teach to mostly computer engineering students, and I teach basically a course in the ethics of computer ethics and ethical issues of computer science, and a course in the philosophy of computer science. And I think that this is a very important part of what I do to, let's say, educate future computer professionals into these ethical and philosophical issues. And I can say that part of my job here is to just show why we need philosophy, why we do need ethics in a, let's say, digitally technologically dominated future. So this means not just to transform my students into naive philosophers or ethicists, but to make them aware of the impact of what they do. And it means not just the impacts in terms of the use of these technologies, but mostly because they are future computer engineers, the impact also on how they design these tools, these systems, and how design is an important part. So, of course, interdisciplinarity is a major part of this, not just in terms of education, but in terms of my research. It's not easy. I think we should also consider many of the challenges, not just for students, but also for teachers and educators in general. So perhaps later on I can just analyze some of these challenges and some of the possible approaches I'm trying to shape a little bit within this context.
Thank you, Viola. Now I would like to invite Bobby Schnabel. Can you introduce your work to us?
Sure. So thank you, oder vielen Dank, Anna. Und guten Tag oder fast guten Abend in Wien, die geliebte Heimatstadt meines Vaters. So that'll be it for German, but I needed to say a little bit for my my Viennese father.
It was nearly perfect.
Well, that's better than my English. Yeah, I'm a computer scientist. I've had a long career by now, and as Anna said, a lot of it in various leadership roles. I'm by no means trained in the areas that we're talking about today. I'm trained as a numerical analyst or numerical computation person, but I got quite involved in ethics in computing, especially ethics in computing education in the last decade, and have spent a lot of time teaching and creating courses in ethics in computing and ethics in data science, and also in a number of professional activities, including helping to create and lead the conference on AI ethics in society. So I'm just going to make a few comments about what I tend to emphasize to students when I teach courses in ethics in computing or ethical issues in data science. And I start out by telling them that as opposed to most of the technical courses they take, where there's facts or techniques that they're trying to learn, here they're really trying to learn concepts that will make a difference in their careers. And I emphasize a few of those. And the first is to consider ethical and societal implications from the outset when they are developing products and technologies. We look at a lot of case studies, and when you look at what's gone wrong, it almost always is because that didn't happen, because the ethical or societal issues were an afterthought and often only after problems developed. And if we can make that change to the next generation of developers, I think we will have made the biggest difference. The second thing I tend to emphasize to them is consider bad actors. That is, people who will abuse whatever the technology is. Again, if you look at case studies, there are so many of them, starting with the internet itself, where we simply didn't consider the things that could go wrong. And then we've had to kind of reverse engineer fixes and always get into a battle at that point between the people who are trying to abuse the technologies. And the third and final one I'll mention, I usually emphasize, is to be attentive to diversity, but a lot of different forms of diversity. One of them can be the cultural differences in the users. This can make a big difference in the technology. The most important one these days is probably the diversity of the data that goes into especially machine learning type systems, and diversity across all sorts of dimensions. And then to the diversity of their teams, because more diverse teams tend not to have the blind spots that you might have otherwise. getting to what Viola talked about, in these courses, we do give them at least a superficial understanding of ethical frameworks, because I think it's important for technical students to understand that there is more to ethics than just common sense. There's people who for millennia have thought about these things, and understanding how they've thought about them is useful to know, and they end up with a bit of a tool set of various frameworks that they might want to think about. And then, of course, we look at various different technical and application areas. But I'll mention one final thing. Of all of the work that the students do in these courses, the thing that I found most useful is we started doing assignments that we call professional interviews, where they talk to somebody who has worked in a technical field for some period of years and just ask them, what are their experiences with ethical issues in the workforce, both technical ones and human ones? And the students tend to take a lot from those experiences. So thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Bobby. Rodrigo has not yet arrived, so I think then we just start the round table with a few questions. Well, you already addressed a number of issues. Maybe start with Dimta. Yesterday we had a talk, and one of the topics that you mentioned, very important, is trust. So trust is very important in the digital society. Do you trust the digital systems, the technologies, and do people trust them? And my question to you is, how would you integrate that into education, that students are aware of this issue of trust? We don't hear you. Yes.
Yeah, that's better.
Now we hear you.
Yeah, so I suppose trust in terms of let's say AI, it's really important for several reasons, and certainly, as I say, I work a lot with the technology companies in Dublin, and they're very, very concerned about what they call a trust gap. So that's a trust gap between the sort of consumers of the end users of their technology, but also trust gap, I think, between more and more between employees and employers with the sort of oncoming of AI. So trust is really important, I think, for a couple of reasons. Trust is essential, obviously, for users to accept and to adopt AI technologies. So users are much more likely to utilize AI systems if they can rely on their outputs, if they trust the systems, if they're accurate, they're reliable, they're beneficial, they're human-centric. And certainly if we want, I think, commercial success for AI, if we want to stimulate consumer demand, then we need to engender this sort of trust among end users. I mean, who would buy a sort of an autonomous car if it wasn't properly and evaluated for safety and regulated accordingly? And then trust, obviously, it helps alleviate a lot of the fears we have, I suppose, about new technologies, the fears and the uncertainties. So maybe concerns about, job displacement, loss of privacy, unintended consequences of AI, they can be mitigated by building trust. And again, that, involves sort of ethical practices, and also sort of positive user experience. And trust, I think, is really essential, for the long-term, let's say, sustainability of AI initiatives and ecosystems. But I think industry talk quite a lot about, trust gap. I think, we also need to be talking about a safety gap, because I think in order, for AI to be trustworthy, it has to be safe. So when I think we talk to our students about, building trust in AI systems, it's really this idea around, safety. How do we build safe and reliable AI systems? And in terms of, building safe AI systems, I think this is really around transparency, around explainability. It's around allowing, I think we need to get much better at sort of developing tools and methodologies that allow our students and ultimately our graduates to be able to open up those data sets, to open up those models, to look under the hood and to be able to see what's happening in there. Tools for data science to be able to actually iteratively explore data sets, to understand those data sets, to examine those data sets for biases, to understand, model inputs and model outputs and understand, you know, sort of the technical aspects of the weighting, let's say, of information coming in and out of models. It's also, you know, I think safety, a huge factor of safety, and something that the EU AI Act really emphasizes. Unlike other regulation, for example, the NIST, the NIST legislation in the US, is this ongoing monitoring of systems in the real world. So in terms of their reliability, so, you know, systems need to act as expected ongoingly, on an ongoing manner in the real world. So I think, you know, a lot of the tools that we have there for our students are there, you know, in terms of, we need to start thinking, though, I think, about these new measures, right? We traditionally teach our computer science students really just to evaluate their computer science or data science models in terms of accuracy. That's really it. Precision, recall, which essentially is a form of accuracy. We need to start thinking about these new measures. How do we measure explainability? How do we measure safety? And you know, and also teach our students to understand the trade-offs there. You know, if we have more explainable systems, our systems may be slower, but, you know, they will be more trustworthy ultimately, right? You know, if we may have to compromise some kind of performance in terms of accuracy for trust. So I think there's a huge amount of work to be done really in terms of that measurement and metrics of AI systems. And I think from our students' point of view, I think we need to be asking them about, you know, measuring safety. I think from end users, we can be asking them about trust. Trust is a very notoriously difficult thing, right, to quantify and measure, right? And you could have a situation where a user trusts the output of a system, but actually the output isn't safe, right? So we have to kind of, you know, weigh those things up against each other. So while I think trust is important, I still go back to, you know, thinking about those issues more around safety and how we measure those.
Yeah, thank you. Well, when we talked, you said something that, for example, in policy making nowadays, still the trust in systems is like absolute, because people think, well, computers don't lie. Computers always tell the truth. And then you explained, well, of course, in spreadsheets, the calculations are correct. The computer doesn't make calculation errors in a spreadsheet, but nowadays we have AI systems. So there's a kind of shift in perception of, you know, there's a shift in the technology itself, but the perception maybe lags behind. And how do you integrate, let's say, that change in that change that the technology is making, this advance, not for the better sometimes. How do we integrate that understanding in, let's say, in your education? That would be maybe my question to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that sort of trust as well often shows a kind of an overconfidence in systems, right? And a very interesting manifestation of that, I'm sure many of you are following the post office scandal in the UK. And there was this huge overconfidence and over-reliance in the output of the computer system, the Horizon system that was used in the post office, and a complete underconfidence in the humans who had, of course, been reliably and accurately and honestly using these systems for so long. And one of the reasons they came up against that was because it's ingrained, it's in the law that, you know, computers don't make mistakes, but our law is outdated, right? The legal systems are outdated because they're based on things, as you say, like calculators and spreadsheets. So these very linear computing systems. So they need, you know, they need to change, right? To accommodate these systems like AI systems that can obviously change and learn and adapt their behaviors in the new world. So that's a really important aspect for our students to understand as well, right? That you know, that is not this absolute, right? And that we need our students to understand, I think, particularly around how systems behaviors can change in the real world, and they can adapt if they're given new inputs or adapted to new contexts. And certainly it shouldn't be, for example, you know, simply taking a data set that works in one context and freely adapting it to another. Again, that goes back to the idea of opening up your data sets and transparency.
Thank you. Yes, so I would ask Viola, so you in your department, so you teach philosophy in a computer science department. You're a kind of alien person to the technologists in the sense of discipline. How does that work out? I mean, how did it started actually that you came as a philosopher into let's say the computer science education, and how does that integrate in the curriculum?
Okay, so this is integrated into the curriculum as a kind of option. Okay, so that's very important in a sense. This is good for me because I have many students, but basically most of them are interested into these topics. So they select my courses. They are not mandatory. So this is the positive side. The other side is that some of the students, they get the master degree in computer engineering without any kind of acquaintance with these kind of topics. And so we are discussing whether it does make sense to at least put off some of these courses as mandatory in the curricula. But I think that there are many challenges, and I would like to discuss some of them. Because first of all, the first challenge is time. So time is really, I mean, I have these courses, it's about 50 hours. You need, as Bobby was suggesting, of course, you need to introduce case studies, but also ethical frameworks, for example, in the case of computer ethics. And it's very important to have a sort of balance between more practice and more theory. And then, of course, you need to do exercises and to involve students into practical kind of stuff. So time is very important. So what I learned is that I decided to introduce less topics, but then to spend more time into the sort of deep analysis into these topics. It's quite unpopular in a sense, but I think that this case, it's a case in which we can see that less is more. It's very important, and usually like instructors, professors, don't like to introduce less topic. But I think it's very important, and also because I learned that students need time also to start interacting. So the second lesson that I learned, and I think it's a challenge, still a huge challenge, is that it's very important for students to learn a completely different language. These are students at the master level in a degree in which basically they learned to reason by numbers, by using formulas, by using equations. So the power of quantities, as Dimna was suggesting, and of measurement, of like they do believe that this is the only way to be rigorous and objective. So I try to learn and to teach them another kind of language, that is the language of philosophy, that is, by the way, where like a possible rigor and where rigor started, but it's very important that they understand that you can be very rigorous even using qualities instead of quantities. And this is like a critical way of thinking, of being how to defend or to present an argument in philosophical terms and stuff like this. And to me, this is very important because they can learn that nuances, gray areas, qualities are important as well into this context. The third lesson that I learned, and I try again to push a little bit, it's that it's very important that my students understand that technologies do not develop in a vacuum. They are really deeply related to humans, societies, and so on. And this is difficult because, again, they have not been trained into this. And this is something that it's difficult. It takes time to think of this or what they learn in terms of socio-technical systems. And then the last, of course, it's just a partial list, but the last point, the last lesson that I think it's important is that they need to learn that good intentions are not enough. And I mean with this that sometimes they think, okay, let's design these systems for the good. I want to have do something good, to have a system that can solve these problems on these or these other problems. And they are most of the time almost completely unaware that there are unintended consequences, that it's not just that like a sort of causal effect, you have a good intention and then everything will be fine, because of course these systems do not develop in a vacuum. And so this is really very important, in particular today when people are just using labels like AI for the good or beneficial artificial intelligence, and it's like, okay, everything is solved because you have good intentions. Things are more complex, more nuanced, and I think that usually I start my first lecture in computer ethics by telling my students that ethics is not a book with the rules or with instructions. It's a process, and they have to learn to stay within this process and also within the different like approaches, views, and the idea that there is no just a universal ethics that they can learn and it's enough.
Thank you, Viola. And I would like to ask Bobby. So you also teach computer science ethics. How is it at your side? Is it similar to what Viola is doing, or do you have a different approach?
Oh, I think there's lots of similarities, other than the fact that Viola is a trained philosopher and I certainly am not. But I think we're starting to see a lot of variation on what's required and what is not. So for instance, Viola talked about it being still optional. In our computer science major at the University of Colorado Boulder, the undergraduates do need to take an ethics course. They have various options. We've started some recent graduate degrees, Coursera degrees, in both computer science and data science, and we've required ethics courses that I've developed in both of those, but in some other degrees not. And I think I haven't seen surveys as you look around the world yet, but I think as I talk to colleagues, you're seeing quite a variation. There are a number of places with computer science or informatics degrees that do require an ethics component, and some don't. And within that, I think a lot of discussion about what the best approach is, and in particular, whether it should be a standalone course or whether it should be integrated into your AI course and your security course and your systems course and all of that. I think ideally, well, in my view, ideally you would do both. The integration is important to the students because they really see that it comes in conjunction with the technical topics they're learning. The standalone course tend to give them the time to actually go more deep, to learn the ethical frameworks, to have breakout discussions, which they do a lot in those sorts of courses. And I think as we're starting to see new curriculum, such as the new ACM computer science curriculum, they're starting to comment on those aspects. The other thing I'll mention, by the way, is that in the courses that I teach, the differences between different parts of the world come up a lot. And the fact that the European Union has taken a stronger, more user-centric and privacy-centric view than any of the other parts of the world, whether it's North America or India or East Asia. We discussed that. We discussed some of the cultural reasons that may be behind that. But these students are mainly going to be working in a multinational world, a global world, and they need to understand that now and probably forever, there will not be uniform legal and regulatory approaches across the whole world.
Thank you. Yes, and a question that I have when we talk about ethics education for computer scientists, I was wondering, so you can of course approach it like you said in a course in which you increase the understanding of ethics for the students and maybe the background of it. But how do you, in learning outcomes, how do you achieve, let's say, the attitude of applying ethics in your, let's say, in your computer science design? What kind of education would be needed? And would that be, let's say, more knowledge about ethics or philosophy? Or is it more, let's say, could it be more practical that students are exposed to other contexts, to other problems, to other issues, and that they learn naturally to evaluate, let's say, the ethical aspects of design and technology without having per se a knowledge on philosophy? It's just as a question, just throwing a question of you. Maybe it's a stupid question, but for the discussion. Viola, can you comment on it maybe?
Yes. This is, of course, this is a delicate question. And I have some colleagues that are complaining, philosopher colleagues and ethicist colleagues that are complaining that like computer scientists are just covering something that should be covered only by philosophers or computer ethicists. I don't think so. But let me just point out a different type of integration in these courses. I had an experience on this. And basically, because of course, also in the past, I had the experience of having the integration like, okay, you have a huge course in artificial intelligence, and then you have like just a small module in the ethics of artificial intelligence. Probably this is not the best option. And also, it's not the best kind of approach that you present to students. So we had this experience with a colleague in electric engineering. So it's not an experience in computer engineering per se, but it's a course in which basically we are two lecturers and we stay just one from philosophy and the other from electrical engineering. And so it's on the ethical issues of power systems. And of course, digital technologies play a major role within this field. But basically, we spend every lecture together in the class, and we are lecturing together. And basically, we cover the same lecture. We cover some more technical stuff and then some more ethical stuff. And we try, it's a huge effort in the sense that every lecture should be very carefully orchestrated, and we stay together and we try to just balance our contribution. But we had a very positive kind of response from students. Because here the message is, okay, let's see and let's try to integrate at the same time, in the same moment, different contexts. Let's see how people coming from different fields can stay together, can use different languages. But I think it's a powerful message also in front of the students, because to be together at the same time, to present like the same topic, but from different perspectives, is a sort of live experience of this integration.
Thank you. And how about you, Dibna? What's your idea about this? So the difference between, let's say, the academic and the training on the spot.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's one that comes up all the time. Because and I suppose one of the things, and again through the Ethics for You project, one of the things that we really tried to focus on, I suppose, was developing a vocabulary for students in order to be able to actually raise these issues. I think many of the students simply didn't have the words or the toolkit. They would sense something was wrong. They weren't sure what it was. So that's the grounding in the ethical theories and the ethical frameworks and why that's so important. And it's really difficult when they go into a company and they're your graduate student, there's a huge power imbalance. And also how software teams tend to work in this kind of very distributed nature. You're using a piece of code that's come from somewhere else, or a data set that's come upstream, and you don't have all of the eyes on all of these things. It's kind of a very distributed way that we work. But I mean, to balance these things up, companies have to have their own codes of ethics. It really comes down to that it has to be sort of a two-way thing, that these employees and graduates have something to hook it onto. I think we will probably see through legislation, obviously we will see a push that will be more around technical documentation, right? So documenting the scope of your AI system, the purpose of it, the requirements around transparency and so on. And that will go some of the way, but it's not going quite as far as a code of ethics, right? And then some of the things that Bobby spoke about there in terms of sort of, the really getting towards the sort of human-centric AI side of things. So I think there's still a bit of a way to go there to sort of, to bring companies further on than just the legal requirements and closer to, the ethical requirements as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I have a question to Bobby about this. So you also you were co-founder of the National Center for Women and Information Technology, and I assume that I don't know, you teaching, so in the early days of ICT education, it was mainly men that were in that were studying information technology. At least here in the Netherlands, it was male dominated, and nowadays there are more women entering. But I'm wondering if, let's say, the context changes by having, let's say, a more female context for the technology, because it might change, let's say, the mindset also of the development of the design of technology for example, for females might be different, and it might open the idea that of let's say avoiding technological determinism when you see a different context. So I was wondering, do you have some idea that ethics in itself maybe can be achieved by just exposing the students to a different context? In this case, more women, for example.
I'll give the answer in a couple of parts. I mean, the simple one is yes, and what that means is that I think one always gets a deeper answer if one has more perspectives, and perspectives that come from different life experiences in the discussions. And one sees this a lot in these courses. And by the way, this totally predates or is independent of computing technologies. And in particular, when you think about things that are male and women, there's a number of very well-known engineering examples of products that were designed basically with men in mind. Airbags in automobiles were an example of that. The first airbags were designed in a way that they hit grown men on the average in their chests and grown women on the average in their faces, which would be disastrous. And they had been designed by men and tested by men. And voice recognition systems actually which are computing technologies, have a similar history. And so, yeah, I think the diversity of what's in the classroom and the diversity of what's in the design team makes a big difference. And more than anything else I've taught, I've really seen that and in ways that are much more than gender. I'll just give one example. We were talking at one point about the use of robots in nursing homes, where you have very interesting, or senior living facilities in general, very interesting discussions about the pros and cons of that and the ethical issues involved. And we had some students who came from other countries, for instance, in Central and South America, where their comments were somewhat almost orthogonal to the discussion, saying, in our society, we would never imagine putting our elders in a special facility. They would be in the homes, the multi-generational homes of their families. And I think that's just an example that's always stuck with me about how if you get various sorts of diversity, gender diversity, national diversity, you can go on from there. It enriches the conversations, particularly in courses like this.
Thank you, Bobby. I saw that Rodrigo just arrived. Welcome, Rodrigo.
Yes,
Welcome,
Anna,
Anna.
thank you.
Great that
very
you
much.
have arrived. And well, you're jumping in the you're on the train that's already riding, but this is a very good moment maybe to because I read your paper yesterday about deep ethics in education, and I was wondering, can you explain to us a bit about this course that you have developed together with Moshe Vardi? I understand.
Yes, of course. But first of all, let me start with an apology and an explanation. There seems to have been a massive miscommunication. The whole time we were talking about Central Time, I was thinking US Central Time. You were meaning Central European Time. So I cleared my evening. I changed my teaching schedule. So, you know, big confusion, but I very much apologize for my part in it.
No problem. We're lost in translation.
Okay, and I want to thank you for the messages saying, where are you? And for my collaborator, Moshe, as well, because that prompted me to run back to my office here. So again, apologies, and happy to have the opportunity here to join you. If it's okay, and again, I don't mean to interrupt the conversation, but I'd love to answer your question.
Yes, please. We were discussing ethics in computer science education, and we were looking at different perspectives and how to achieve that. Can you add, let's say, an ethics course to a computer science curriculum? Should you integrate it into existing courses?
Yes.
What is the approach? Can you add, for example, different perspectives to teach students? The approach, is it more about knowledge about ethics, or is it more the application of it and the outcome, the learning outcome to apply, let's say, it to your technological design? And the question to you have this course on deep ethics, so I'm wondering if you can tell us what it is and how your experience was with it.
Yes, absolutely. So Dr. Moshe Vardi, who's here with us today, and myself started thinking about this course a few years ago. At the time, there was a lot of conversation here in the United States about how academia had, quote unquote, fallen asleep at the wheel. How all of these concerns around big tech and around the proliferation of technologies, and maybe in particular social media technology, was something that was becoming increasingly ubiquitous in society. And the social and ethical impacts of that were starting to be seen, right? So where were the educators? And what was their role throughout this transformation? Moshe and I were very interested in kind of pushing past traditional boundaries that had defined ethics in computer science. So again, this is not to say that there was a single approach, but it is to say that we were interested in integrating a kind of multidisciplinary perspective. So it wasn't just that we wanted to talk about traditional ethical normative frames. It wasn't that we wanted to talk about what has traditionally been kind of ethics conversation oriented around issues of safety, of transparency, of accountability. My personal background is in philosophy and in media studies. So what we wanted to bring to the fore was really a wealth of critical thinking, of historical thinking, and also of political economic perspectives. So what we started developing was this approach that, again, we refer to as deep tech ethics. We weren't so much interested in breadth as much as we were interested in depth. And the model for that, I took from the work of Norwegian philosopher Arne Næss. Næss was a famous ecologist who developed precisely a theory of deep ecology. His idea was, there's kind of shallow ecology, which is to say we need to protect the environment because it's a resource that is valuable to humans. And then the deep version of that is to say, no, things have an inherent value, right? So we need to transform our paradigm in relationship to the earth, right? Again, let's not just think about recycling. Let's think about changing our consumption and production habits. So again, he was operating at these two levels between shallow thinking and deep thinking. What we wanted to do was to implement that similarly to thinking about technology and ethics, right? So not just, the classic example, kind of cliched at this point, right? But to talk about the trolley problem, right? Not just what are the myriad of possibilities that can happen here and how the normative ethical frameworks of utilitarianism or deontology apply here, right? But let's think more profoundly, right? Who is going to benefit from autonomous vehicles, right? Who, in what cities, in what parts of the world is it going to be present or not, right? What about the drivers, right, that are going to be influenced by the algorithms, and thinking more about job precarity. So again, our approach was to try to integrate the kinds of questions that had historically been asked more in cultural studies, in media studies, in certain branches within philosophy about power dynamics, and thinking much more specifically about the historical manifestation of these power dynamics, and thinking even further specifically about ways to address those by thinking about social responsibility. So that was the theoretical frame, which fortunately resonated with a lot of other efforts here in the United States and in Europe. And I feel like it's been building momentum in this kind of coalition in terms of thinking about things in this more kind of structural way.
Thank you. Yeah, I was curious, what were your teaching methods? What did you do? What is case study, or did the students design technology for, let's say, for a certain group or for a certain community? How did you achieve the deep ethics thinking in your teaching?
Yeah, so something that was very valuable here was thinking about how to connect with the students at a kind of affective or emotional level, right? Again, we wanted to move past the paradigm of thinking about ethics as this very kind of abstract or universalist or kind of rationalist approach to designing and to doing things. But again, we were more interested in not only providing students with knowledge about the ethical and social implications of technology, but really trying to connect with them at a kind of empathetic level. So for instance, some of the tools that we used for that, journalistic case studies, right? Not just reading, for instance, about issues around fairness in machine learning, right? Or about social bias. Again, you can read all the statistics that you want about that. But a journalistic story kind of narrating the struggles that some people go through, right? That allows the students to connect in a way that they otherwise wouldn't be able to do so. Using viewpoints also from parts of the world outside of the United States, right? Unfortunately, education here in the United States in some regards tends to be somewhat constrained to particular narratives, right? So very importantly was kind of complementing that with other broad global historical viewpoints. So the way to do that was, I know it's a computer science class, but a way of doing this was teaching history. And I don't mean history as in like, hey, let's put out a textbook and like read about what happened, right? There's a line by a famous critical thinker who says that history is what hurts, right? That's how Frederick Jameson thought about it, right? Always historicize, because it's always through that history that you come to understand the kind of power dynamics that exist now. So that was another approach. Another personal one of mine was also using speculative fiction, right? So integrating either TV shows or movies or short stories or books, but again, kind of appealing to students in terms of their imagination, right? In terms of encouraging them to think about technological design, not only in terms of, okay, what's going to make the most money or disrupt the market now or optimize a certain kind of inefficiency, right? But instead to think about technological design as opening new futures, as opening new possibilities, right? Understanding the history, but such as not to repeat the problems of the past, to open up new ways of doing things.
Thank you. Yes, that sounds very, very interesting. And I was wondering, for example, a question to you also, for example, if you integrate this approach in your computer science lectures, like making students develop technologies with in mind, let's say, the purpose of the technology, for example, for a certain group, for example, for elderly people, or for example, for homeless people, would that be a way to teach them the different contexts, but also, let's say, to think in a purpose of doing something good for a certain group, and teach them a different attitude than just, you know, technology for the sake of improvement, advancement, and bigger and faster, what we not normally see as technological advancement. Of how do you see that, for example?
Yes, I think that there's a paradigm shift, right, between thinking about technological innovation, right, as being driven strictly by financial motives, right, or kind of this aura that exists a lot here around Silicon Valley innovators, right, about being a quote unquote a rock star, right. Again, the kind of culture that's built around that, right, which sometimes prizes innovation for the sake of innovation. So that's one perspective, right? But the other one is what you mentioned, Anna, right? Let's not start with, again, what's going to disrupt things. Let's start with, what do people need, right? What is it within our local community or local ecology? What is it that people are missing? What is it that people could benefit from? And starting with that, and even taking that into consideration, not just about saying like, oh, okay, well, you know, there's an app for that, right? But instead integrating them into the design process, right? So integrating them into, again, at various points in the design process, then thinking about, is this really what you need, right? What kind of input or feedback do you have here that, again, can benefit you? So yeah, I mean, that in my mind is a radically different way of doing things. Again, these two forces don't have to oppose each other. I think that they both can benefit, right? But it's not thinking about specifically about profit, but thinking about how we can develop things in such a way that it can directly and immediately benefit people.
Thank you. Yeah, I would like to ask Dimna, because you mainly work in the medical, let's say, context. So there, it is evident that technologies can have an enormous positive impact in healthcare, etc. But can you teach well students or let's say technologists develop medical systems and improve them, and have this in mind to make the better and the most efficient systems? But how do you integrate that aspect of, let's say, the ethics aspect in it, or at least the fear of doing it wrong?
Yeah, so I suppose one of the things we're working on in TU Dublin, so it's not strictly medical, but it chimes a lot with what Rodrigo was talking about there. As part of our third year undergraduate computer science course, students have to undertake a team project. And as part of this team project, we run a co-design software methodology with service users from St. John of God's Community Hospital, who are service users with intellectual disabilities. And the men and women from St. John of God's Community Hospitals are co-designers in the software design and development process, where they're working together with teams of our computer science students. And it really is just a fantastic, when you talk about teaching empathy, it's just a fantastically eye-opening experience, I think, for our students, because first of all, we have a diversity issue with our students, like everywhere, computer science students, like everywhere in the world, they are at that point in their career, I guess, mostly 21-year-old white men is what we would see. And what we're trying to do is, I suppose, engage our students with end users, who will actually use their creations and really gain a deep insight into the end users' needs, their challenges, their perspectives, and also, teaching, not just putting yourself in the shoes of the end user, but teaching things like, for example, consent is really important, right? And so how we do that is we use a design thinking approach. So we use, for example, tools like, empathy maps. We use other tools around, sort of brainstorming big brain ideas, then pain points and challenges, and of course using a lot of sort of user-centered design technologies that really go in there. And what we see is it's first of all, I think we get much better, I think, problem identification, actually not just what is the problem and how can technology solve that, right? And actually it's much more difficult to design technology that has to solve some of these real world issues and these real world problems. So many of our service users, for example, have accessibility issues, right, which is not standard often and built into technological projects, and we have to think about how we would address that. As I say, the empathy is really important. The other thing I think that's really important is that kind of iterative improvement, and we see that over the weeks, the kind of continuous feedback and the collaboration really helps kind of build the relationship, but also refine and kind of enhance the technology over time as well. And it just facilitates a new kind of culture, I think, of learning and adaptation and accommodation and patience, and ultimately leads to more user-centric tools that are more usable by a broader group of people. But it's a hugely eye-opening experience, and I couldn't agree more with Rodriguez about that idea of difficult real world kind of wicked problems that we call, and putting yourself in the end user, in the shoes of the end user, is, if you can do that for your students at all, it's a fantastic experience.
Wow, that is a fantastic experience that you're sharing with us in let's say computer science education. And so the same as the course that Rodrigo just described, with a different approach, but both are, let's say, very community oriented actually, and not on the individual. So then I have a question to Viola. So what I see at our university is a lot of attention for ethics in computer science, but when you talk to the lecturers, and they are not philosophers, they are computer science people, but they tend to go to the individual as the ethical let's say aspect should be experienced very individually and not in community, and not in a social whereas what Rodrigo and what Dimna are telling is really this community idea of working together, of exchanging ideas, or looking at the social inclusion. And how do you see that in your teaching?
Of course, I don't have any kind of experience in this direction. Most of the time, I agree that imagination plays a very important role, but as a more traditional philosopher, I use kind of thought experiments, but they are like tools of imagination, and they work very well. And also it's a way to like push students in the direction of like just thinking and having thinking as a way and running imagination without any other kind of tool as a way to imagine like and also, for example, to imagine possible unexpected consequences, unintended consequences in the design of technologies and stuff like this. But this brings also to one of my biggest concerns related teaching ethics to future computing professionals, which is in a way to just make those who are already kind of sensible or also being in the right universities, like, for example, Politecnico di Milano is a well a reputed university in Italy, brings like more power to those that have already some kind of power because they are well educated, they are in the good universities and stuff like this. And in a sense, this leaves the others. In Italy, we have many universities which are not open to this kind of education and integration into the curricula of computing professionals. So I think this is a big issue, and just perhaps we can discuss during the discussion.
Okay, thank you, Fiola. I think we are approaching a bit the end, because I also want a Q&A so that all the other participants can ask questions. But I have a last question, maybe to Bobby. We have talked a lot of how to design education for computer scientists that involves ethics. But my question is, so if you look at the learning outcomes that we agreed on, that we need professionals that are more, aware of the impact of technology in society, how would you evaluate this kind of education? How do you know at the end that the students have achieved, let's say, the learning outcomes? Because it's not just a knowledge thing, but more an attitude.
Anna, as you started your question, I was afraid you were going to ask that one, because that's difficult, and maybe in the discussion we can get some help from if there are colleagues who come from more of a humanities or social science background who know the answer to that better than we can. When organizations like ACM design curricula, they try to look at learning outcomes as well. But clearly it's not a factual learning outcome. It's an outcome of being sensitive to things and being able to assess things. And instead of answering your question, which I'm not good at, I think I'll just give an answer that may help us all, or an example that may help us all frame our thinking on this. There's some situations that we expose the students to that there's closer to a right or wrong answer. In facial recognition systems, they should have been trained on diverse data. I don't know if anybody will argue that, and students just need to be aware, if they're doing something analogous in machine learning, that they should do that. But there was a reference earlier to autonomous vehicles, and there one gets into deep conversations about how willing should we be to take risks in testing these systems, so we get more quickly to the time where we're going to be saving at least many tens of thousands of lives globally by deploying them. And then it's deeper than that. So if you're assessing the learning outcomes, you're trying to assess whether students can think through situations like the two that I've just mentioned. And now I've just kind of opened that up, so maybe some other people here are wiser than I about telling us, how do you assess that you've made students better at that than they were starting in?
Thank you, Bobby. Yeah, it is the question: how do they become better global citizens? And that is our challenge. And I think it's very difficult to answer. But maybe we'll open the floor for other comments or questions or suggestions or nice statements. Moshe, please, the floor is yours.
I'm missing some more frisson in this discussion. From my point of view, we are a discipline in crisis. We have been techno-solutionists for now since the beginning of the discipline. We were in love with our technology. We did not think about social consequences. Even now, when the societal consequences are becoming clearer and clearer by the day, where with a growing sense that the world is broken and we played a part in breaking it, we are just continuing as usual. You know, we get students, they come because they think it's going to be a great job. They're going to make lucrative offer in Silicon Valley. We have some of our luminaries, Dave Patterson, who is a distinguished computer scientist, ACM president, and then he retires. Oh, well, he's going to go work at Google. And when you talk to people, you talk to some of these people, they says, well, you know, we are just building scalable file system, larger data centers. Somehow still, I don't see that as a discipline we've accepted. This is what we have done. This is our responsibility. And somehow when we talk to students, to me, the level of the intensity has to be much higher.
So you think that we are discipline in crisis and we need more urgency, and it has to.
You know, we are just nice, intellectual, doing things. It just I don't think that the discipline yet feels. And maybe I'm the one who is just out of bounds here, but I think it's a discipline crisis, and we're not communicating broadly enough.
We should be more bold.
Anna, if I can jump in and just make
Sure.
one comment on what Moshe said. And Moshe, we've known each other for a long time, and he's played a wonderful role in helping our community think more about these issues. And just to cite too, if we as a community were to spend more time on really thinking through AGI and what that means and where it's going to, and really thinking through the issue that you focused on for 1 or 2 decades now, the impacts of technology on the global workforce, that might take a step in the directions that you're talking about.
Thank you. I think George was first. George.
Thank you, and great thanks to the panel. These are precious issues, and that's only balanced by how difficult they are. In a sense, although it was not planned that way, I'm following up Moshe's question. It is a critical time, and I wonder, listening, for example, to Viola saying that some of the students need a new language. They don't understand when you try to address these issues in a computer science course. And the same, Dimpna said that they have difficulty understanding the words. Rodrigo said that to achieve the purpose of ethical computer scientists, that requires critical thinking, social responsibility, empathy. I wonder, can we expect credibly that this can be developed at the master's level, for example, in a computer science department? Or shouldn't all this very useful work that you're doing, all these very important questions that you are asking, systematically now start being fed back to lower levels of education, like secondary education, and even earlier? Because that's the time, as Aristotle would put it, that the upbringing gives you this capability of critical thinking, of reconciling the personal well-being with the collective well-being that can then guide you. And furthermore, a computer scientist, as it was brought up in the discussion, will go work in a multinational company where his or her bosses will not be computer scientists. And what if they have not, followed a computer science ethics course? So should much of that somehow be fed back to earlier levels where there is work ongoing on developing critical thinking, social responsibility, and empathy?
Thank you, George. Hannes.
Thanks a lot for this discussion because it brings up many interesting ideas and things we are already discussing for some time in this digital humanism context. And referring back to Moshe, I think computer science is more than computer science, and we are super successful. So this brings us into this, I think, crisis and being interwoven with all other developments. And this brings me to the question, because we are discussing ethics, and maybe ethics is not enough. Maybe we should also discuss about power relationships, economic relationships. When we talk about technology design, it's not just making the technology better. I think it's also something about the overall purpose of this technology for societal needs. And I think this is the background of this discussion, which could also help computer science, and this would also bring in other disciplines, and maybe having developed curriculum not only for computer science students, but having more broader curriculums where we could also integrate other disciplines on a more equal foot. So it's not just ethics for computer scientists or politics for computer scientists, but maybe we should think of a studium generale for being much, much broader. Maybe this would be a possible answer to the discussions we have for some time already.
Thank you, Hannes. Yes, I was wondering, do we need maybe a different kind of education additional to computer science, in which the digital society, like let's say a digital humanism curriculum that is fully dedicated to the problems of the digital society? Like I have here a book, I think it's familiar to you. And I wondered, all the topics covered in this book are actually, could become a course, let's say a curriculum in itself, because all there are so many topics covered in this book about digital humanism, and the textbook itself could be used as a kind of guiding tool for education. Viola?
Just a very quick answer to some of the issues raised. I totally agree that it's not just a matter of teaching critical thinking and ethics to future computer professionals at the universities. So it's a matter of teaching to any kind of level of schools, but also, and this is I think it's a major issue, to try to include those who are not going to the schools anymore, in a sense. Young people in Italy, we have a lot of young people not going to schools, not working, and these are like a large part of the population that are completely outside of being citizens, because also of you need to have digital competencies to being critical digital competencies to being citizens. And then the second very short claim is related to how we measure the impact on these students of teaching them critical thinking, ethics, and stuff like this. Of course, I don't have an answer, Bobby, unfortunately, even if I've been trained as a philosopher. But I have a kind of anecdotal experience. My students, until a few years ago, most of them, they had a dream to go to work for large companies like Meta, Google, and they were the best of them were deeply into this direction. I've noticed, but of course this is a sort of an anecdotal experience, that this is not like this. They are very critical. They don't want to go, or some of them, even the best of them, they don't want to go anymore to that kind of companies. They are aware of many issues, and also of the power that they have in changing the world, in a sense.
Thank you, Viola. Rodrigo.
Yeah, I think that I can add a couple of things. One about assessment, and then the other one about the kind of complexities of the crisis, if you will. The first point being about assessment, in that, look, in my experience as an educator, something that I've had to learn has been the fact that students are increasingly concerned about their grade more than about anything else. And unfortunately, what that means is that any kind of assignment, which again, the spirit might be to try to challenge them, for them to try to essay different concepts, to think critically in different ways, right? But oftentimes my experience has been that not by the student's own fault, but by these cultural changes in society, in the university, right? They feel from their parents, right? They feel this pressure that they must get the best grade in every single class. And not only that, right? But they're majoring in computer science. And here in the US, you can do multiple majors. So again, they're doing all of these things all at the same time, right? And they feel like this constant pressure that it's only worth it if it's externally validated, right? If they get the number, if they meet the metric, right? And look, for us as professors, this affects us too, in that, I get course evaluations at the end of the semester. A lot of my professional development depends upon having those positive reviews, right? So there's all of these forces, all of this kind of techno-solutionism goes along with the quantification of everyday life, right? And this puts undue pressures on the kernel of value, which is learning, right? So that's one issue that I think is affecting this and relates to the second point that I wanted to make about the kind of crisis that we're dealing with, which, look, I'm not a computer scientist, so I don't think that I can speak about there being a crisis in the discipline. But what I can say is that there's definitely some kind of broader crisis going on. I'll tell you, this was about 10 years ago when I started teaching. This was in New York. This was around the time when students started bringing their devices to the classes, right? This was a transition from notebooks to laptops and then phones. No? So there was a student that kept pulling out her phone in the middle of class and without any reservations, texting or doing something else. I repeatedly asked her to please put her phone away. And then at some point I had to pull her aside. Again, this was 10 years ago, no? I had to pull her aside and say like, hey, forget about the fact that I'm your teacher and that, I can penalize you for not participating or whatnot, right? I'm just trying to have a conversation here with you. I'm trying to share some knowledge with you. And, I'm inviting you to participate in the dialogue, right? Imagine how it feels that I'm looking at you and you're on your phone, right? And then I asked her, think about it like when you're at the dinner table and maybe you're trying to talk to your father and he's like on the phone, right? How does that feel? And the answer she gave me just blew my mind. She said, yeah, well, my father's on the phone the whole time and he doesn't care. So what's the problem? And again, that was very striking to me because it showed me that, the challenges that I was facing were not unique to the classroom, right? There was this broader social issues. And again, look, maybe this is very kind of traditionalistic on my part, or, maybe I've turned into the old grumpy professor, I don't know, right? But for me, what's important is being able to preserve that ability to have dialogue, that ability to have conversation, right? And, for us as educators, forget about computer scientists or philosophers or media theorists, right? As educators, I feel that that's something that we can do, right? We can help create those spaces of dialogue and of learning and of critical and creative thinking. And I see that as essential to everything that we do.
Thank you, Rodrigo. Well, we're running out of time. We're already past 1 minute past time. So I think we must end now this very interesting discussion. I think we're just scratching the surface of this important issue, and we must continue this discussion soon about what kind of education we need for the digital society. But for now, I want to give now the floor to Peter, because you are going to let us hear some music.
Yeah, happy to share that. But Anna, maybe you can explain a bit why you picked this particular piece that we're going to listen to. It was your choice, so I think.
Sure. This is a song by Clara Nunes. It's an old song about, I think, from the 70s. It's Brazilian. She's a Brazilian samba singer, and she sings about the three races of Brazil, which is the indigenous people, the Afro-Brazilians, and the workers, actually. So it's about, let's say, the sad story of the poor people in Brazil, and about the time of slavery and how sad it was. And it's a kind of revolting song about the freedom fighters in Brazil.
Great. Thanks for choosing this. We'll just very briefly announce the next talk that we have in our lecture series, and that is on March 19th, again at our usual time at 5 p.m. Central European time. So also we would just as you were joining, we were just talking about these different cultural backgrounds, and then you make this example of different central times that there are in the world, right? Where it's not obvious which one is referred to, but we're talking about Central European time, 5 p.m. in 2 weeks, and Virgilio Almeida will talk about algorithmic institutionalism, and Linda Hartmann will moderate. So in 2 weeks, for today, I want to thank everybody, Dimna, Viola, Bobby, and Rodrigo, and also Anna for structuring this wonderful discussion. I think this was very good, and thanks to all of you. And then here we go with Clara Nunes.
Ninguém ouviu soluçar de dor no canto do Brasil. Lamento triste sempre ecoou, desde que um índio guerreiro foi pro cativeiro e de lá cantou. Negro entoou canto de revolta pelos ares do quilombo dos Palmares, onde se refugiou. Fora a luta dos inconfidentes, pela quebra das correntes, nada adiantou. E de guerra em paz, de paz em guerra, todo povo dessa terra, quando pode cantar, canta de dor. Mas que é bonito. trabalhador. Esse canto que devia ser um canto de alegria, sou apenas como um soluçar de dor.
Goodbye.
Bye bye. Thank you.
Bye
Thank you.
to everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye bye. We'll see
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye bye. Thank you for a great,
Bye.
Bye.
great
Thank you
discussion.
very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you, Dipna, Rodrigo. Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Anna.
Bye. Thank
Bye.
you,
Bye. Bye.
Rodrigo.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you, Bobby. Thank you.